see a question in here.
Two of them.
So one of the questions says, how does meritocracy impact remote teams? Wow, that's a relevant question today for sure.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So honestly, it's how best to answer that question. So I think people feel like if everyone's remote and everyone is, working remotely, and so theoretically everyone's, equal, because now no one has this, because there's a bias called distance bias. So the closer you are to headquarters and leaders, the more effective or successful you can be. And there are companies that you can't, if you work in the field, you're not going to get promoted unless you work at headquarters, right? So there is that. And so theoretically, working remotely eliminates that. But here's the interesting thing, right? And it's not just working. Let's think about society and school and those kinds of things. So not everyone has the same access to the same types of internet possibility and infrastructure to this, right? If someone is socioeconomically not as, so like for me and my kids, I mean, I have my own office upstairs, everyone has internets and computers. So there's some privilege you have with economic security, right? And so we can adjust to some of the what happens because of remote working, but a lot of people don't. A lot of people can't, right? There's research that actually shows too, if you think about meritocracy, and again, merit is no matter how hard you work, if you work hard, you're going to be successful. You have women, this recent article said that one of the biggest impacts to any particular group in our society because of this remote working has been women, because they primarily do most of the childcare still. And so if you happen to be a woman who has kids, or a woman who has family responsibilities, as senior citizen, elderly folks, your parents, you have to take care of them. It's not the man who is stepping up, the male, if that's part of the relationship, if it's a male-female relationship, right? I'm just making that assumption. And for this particular example, they're not doing it. Women are the ones who are still producing primary child care in those situations. Kids sitting at home, having to go to school, handling kindergartners while they're trying to do Zoom calls and do their work. And so women are working just ungodly hours, and they're having more impact. So if you start seeing their productivity slip, or they don't appear to be as engaged, or they're literally tired and can't function as well as they have been, how is merit coming into play if you have a situation where you don't have that, right? Where you can focus on your Zoom meetings, you can do this, you can take advantage of the fact you don't have to commute in. So that's how I would say is that in fact, this remote working has exposed another barrier towards a minority group, which have been women. And then if you look at intersections and you look at race and gender, and you think about socioeconomic capability and all those kinds of stuff, then you have access to less technology and better technology and used to it, and it's a struggle. And so in fact, it's exasperated it as opposed to making it more fair. If that's, I know, again, long-winded response, but that's what you get from me.
Helpful, definitely.
And it was, there was another question up here a moment ago too. This one. What should leaders do? You want me to jump into this one, Cody? I know that's something that we had talked about too, about the leaders.
Yeah. I think this is really helpful because, go ahead and take that one.
Yeah. So when I think about what leaders should be doing, if you think about my discussion of what inclusive leaders should do, so you get a little hint of what I think inclusive leaders and leaders should do. I think leaders should do a number of things. I think leaders need to challenge notions within their sphere of responsibility that privilege isn't real and that meritocracy is how people succeed. Things are not going to change in the corporate situation of where you work until leaders recognize this and make a point of being aware that promotions, visibility to leadership, getting the best jobs, getting in high potential programs, all these different things that leaders have control and you're doing is not going to be effective in work unless you start with the premise that that privilege is, that meritocracy isn't real, and that privilege is something that has to be dealt with. I think leaders have to full on jump into inclusion. I think the best way, even if you think of Markovich or some of these other arguments of how to fix meritocracy, is about creating more access to income and wealth and jobs and growth. So in other words, remove any stagnated growth within our society from middle class to upper class. So eliminate that, compress that. It's called compressed meritocracy or egalitarian meritocracy. So leaders have got to become champions of inclusion and to make sure everyone has access to the goodies in order to be successful, so that so what you're doing, to your point, is you actually are leveling the playing field. So that's what they should do. So they should work towards leveling the playing field by fully jumping on and embracing inclusion. Here's a couple other things that I would say. They need to wake up every single day. Leaders need to wake up every single day with the dilemma that marginalized people, that there are marginalized people, and that they should do their part to address it. If you're in a position of power, if you are someone who owns a company, if you're someone who owns a radio talk show, and you have a massive audience, you have the responsibility to get fired up that this American dream is a sham, that not everyone who wants to be successful can be successful by working hard, because we see every day that that's not the case. So leaders need to have a dilemma that there's a problem and I need to fix it, and I'm going to use my power and privilege to do so. Two other quick things. Make sure equity is top of mind. Nowadays, Cody, even when we were together at Microsoft, we didn't talk about equity. We talked about diversity.
Yeah.
And then soon we talked about diversity and inclusion. Now we talk about diversity, inclusion, and equity. And there's been a lot of that because of the acknowledgement that institutionalized forms of discrimination and oppression are what's maintaining the system, right? It's what's making it hard for people to be successful. Equity is now what this is all about. Equity is about fairness. Equity is about making sure that equal opportunity isn't where we stop, that we actually look at what are the outcomes of that equal opportunity. It should be fair. And if it's not, we need to fix it. And so equity, so leaders need to be thinking about equity. And the last thing that I'll say, and there are probably more that we could put in there, is leaders need to lean into overlooked people. They need to lean into the success of overlooked people.
Yeah.
You have a choice between two people, someone who's always gotten this position, part of the privileged, majority, and you have someone who is capable right there, may not have quite the experience and may lack some of the experience needed for the job. What leaders need to do is lean into that person, create the capability within them, lean in to make sure they're successful, and give them an opportunity, because it's so stacked against people nowadays. And you see this a lot. Where you see this a lot is because of the pandemic. There's so many unemployed people. And so hundreds of people are applying for one job. And so people are looking at experience. You see what I'm saying? So we've got to lean into the people who are overlooked and make sure they can be successful. That's what I would suggest that leaders do. Hopefully that answers your question.